I'm Steph Kohler, co-founder of Ligantic, and welcome to part 2 of the tutorial around creating a portfolio on the Ligantic platform. We've already gone through in part 1 of the tutorial series an introduction to the Experience Designer and creating the homepage. So we're going to skip straight to creating an About page today. If you want to cover an introduction to the Experience Designer or go through the homepage creation, please go back and watch part 1 now. So let's jump straight through to our About page. In this section, we're really going to focus on structuring content and how you can start thinking about that structure depending on what you want to build. If we go to our reference portfolio, we can see we've got a 2-column structure for this page. And when it goes onto a smaller screen, we can see that that structure goes into a single column, which is exactly the sort of responsive behavior that we want to see. I go on to that wider screen again, it's gone and captured out. We can also see that it's got, regardless of how wide I put the screen, we've got a maximum width that the content is spread over. So we need to have a containing box in there as well. We're going to build this out together. So let's jump into it. So what we can see from this portfolio demo is we've already built out our home experience. We're going to go in and create a brand new experience here. So I'm going to call this About, and what that's automatically built or automatically done is created my internal name, the title name, which will be shown at the top here, and my path name. So I might want to call this, so you'll see where this title changes when I go through and publish it. I'm just going to pull one box in and publish this so we can go out to the cloud and see where that title is. So we'll see the path name is the lowercase about. The title that I set is About Thomas Weaver up there. You can see you can go in and edit these if you need by hitting create a version and changing it up here in each of those. So that way you can really start to construct every bit of the experience quite dynamically. The other thing that we did in part 1 of the tutorial was we created the home experience. So rather than recreating the body and the nav bar, what we're going to do is we're going to select the body here, which is a box element. I'm going to right click and hit copy, or I could use those keyboard shortcuts. And I'm coming back to the About page, the About experience here, and onto this box I'm going to hit paste. Now I've done that because it just allows us to copy some of the configuration over already, which is exactly what we want. But I'm going to go ahead and delete some of this lower content down here. So I'm just pressing the delete key on my keyboard as I'm selecting those. And what we can see is we've got our nav bar, but it currently looks like the home page is the selected one. So I'm going to go through to About, go into the typography, copy this color because I'm going to use it later, but I'm going to delete that out. I'm going to go to home here and change that color, the one I just copied. Just paste that in there. Now we can see it looks like the About page is the one that's selected. And if I hit publish on that, go up here and hit refresh, that's currently going through to the cloud or this development environment for us to watch there. The other thing that we can do now that we already have the home page created is we can go into our home text, click up into the link and connect this up so that when we click on it, it actually takes us to the right page. So instead of a URL, we want to select the experience type because it's a Ligantic experience, and we're going to select the home experience there. Perfect. If I publish that and go back and refresh in our experience, when we click home, it takes us through to that home page. Exactly what we want. We're going to go through and link the About link up. And that should be enough work on the nav bar for this experience. We'll link that contact one up when we make it in a little bit. So looking at this main bit of content here, there are a couple of structural things that we need to do. But we're going to do that by dragging a few boxes in and then organizing them. So we're going to pull in a box within here, which is going to be a container. Now this container is going to help us to structure out that content so it doesn't go too wide and we can really use that white space. Inside of that box, I'm going to drop in the two main bits of content. So I'm going to make sure they're the right hierarchy. So we want them to be inside the container. And we'll see why in a second. The first box I'm going to call our profile section. The second box I'm going to call our about section, which will contain the majority of that text. And so even without having the sections in here, let's start really putting in some of the configuration that's going to help us. So for our main bit of content, we want the layout here. We actually want it to be centered. So I'm going to open our layout configuration. This has got leftover configuration from when we copied it over from the home page or the home experience. We want to justify our content to the center, and that'll keep everything quite nicely aligned on those bigger screens. This container box is where we want to go in and modify the size. So we want it to use up 100% of the width that is available to it. But we want to put in a maximum width of 144 pixels. And we want to do that because we want to make sure that we've got that white space and that the content included in the profile section and the about section never goes further than that. Other things that we want to do in this container is really set out that layout. So open up the layout configuration. We want it to, by default, go in a row configuration, so that left to right. So that'll bring the profile page, the profile section and the about section alongside each other. We want to justify them both to, we want to align them both to the start of the row there. And we want to do a wrap configuration. So that means they will wrap underneath each other if there's not enough space for them, which is exactly the behavior that we want when it goes onto a smaller screen. Actually, I don't want those to justify to the left-hand side of that row. I actually want them to justify to the center. So I've just shifted that. It's a lot of different ways that you can control the configuration of the way that this layout works. And by playing around with what you want to achieve, you have a lot of power just with these 4 different configuration options here. All right, so let's start populating this with content. So in our profile section, we want to put in if we go back to our reference, we want to put in an image, a bit of text, and then these 3 links here. So we'll put these in a containing box. So let's go to our blocks, put in an image, some text, and a containing box for those links. We'll get them into the right order. Let's go ahead and select that image, select the entity, go to the image there. Oh, and I called it about, so that's that one there. We want to keep this one at a bit of a bigger size there and in a square format. So let's go 350 for that one. We want that to be contained. For the heading content we want here, let's put in some of that text. So it's Thomas Weaver, and in the typography side here, we want to increase the size of that text. We want to change the font weight so it's a little bit bolder. A little bit more than that. We want to align that text to the center. And that looks looking pretty good. And in this box down here, which is the social links, and I'll name it that, I'm actually going to go back over to our homepage where we had this experience, because we've already built this. So I'm going to copy this social links box from here. I just use my keyboard shortcuts and come back into it here and pasted it. This way, makes it a little bit easier. We probably want these to be a bit smaller in this version. So instead of the current size that they've got of the 50, we want to drop them down to, let's go 30. We'll do that for each of these. And for the layout here, we want to justify that in the center. Now we probably want a little bit of space in between these. We can do that by adding a gap. That we can have a look and see how that looks. Probably a gap of 2 looks quite nice in there. So I'm gonna keep that with our profile section now being complete. So let's move into our about section. So our about section has elements here, and for each of the different type of text elements, we're going to need to bring in a text a text block, and that's because when we're applying a style of text to a block, it applies to the entire block. So we're going to want to do this size block, then this size, and then we're actually going to want to do a few different things here because these are different colors. We're going to design these with a few containing boxes and then 2 different text boxes. So it's going to be a really good way for us to see how you can start building these designs. So let's pull this one in. We're going to pull in the heading text. So we'll call that heading. And I'll pull in another bit of text we'll call content. And then we're going to pull in third bit of text, which will be the awards. And then we're going to bring in a containing box for the list of the awards. Before I go any further with those, though, I'm going to start populating these and making sure they're going in the right sections. All right, so in our heading, in our content, we come in here and paste. Now we can do a little bit of styling in here. So we can select this top bit and we can change it from a paragraph style to a heading 1 style, which will make it that size that we want. And we've got the different paragraph here. So that's the exact sort of text that we want. So I'm going to close off that heading text. And then in our awards, we'll select all of that and change it to a heading 2. We actually want to bring in 2 text boxes that'll go one after the other. And we want this box to have no spacing around it. So I'm going to remove the automatically applied padding by just changing all of those defaults to 0. And we want that layout to be a row direction as opposed to one after the other. Then we want to capture this text here in that first one. And in the second one, I'm just pulling in a little bit of extra content. And we've done that primarily because we want to change the color of this second bit of text. So I'm going to come in here, change the color for everything that's applied in that one. And so I'm going to do award. And rather than recreate that by pulling in the separate components, I'm going to pull in 2 more boxes and then copy that content over. So again, making sure that they sit in the right way. I know I had a box that was dropped in here. So I just dropped at the top there. So pull them into the right spot, copy and paste them in. So we've got them exactly as we want them. So if I just hit publish on that now and refresh this page, it is starting to look kind of how we want, but hasn't wrapped into the size. And that's partially because we haven't set the size of this about section to be anything that would wrap automatically. So if I go into our size configuration and give this a max width of 865 pixels and hit publish, come back over here So I was a little confused as to why this wasn't going in the right direction, that we wanted it to go into the row direction. And it's actually because our main has a maximum width already set on it. So let's remove that because that's a carryover from when we copied it over from the home experience. That's always one of the things you've got to be worried or cognizant of. So we'll hit publish on here, come over and refresh. That's exactly what we're after. So it doesn't quite look like our it doesn't quite look like our reference image just yet, and that's because of a few things. I'm actually going to go into our space settings and update our theme because that's pulling over some of the examples from there. And so let's jump in. I'll show you how to do that. We've got this all saved, so we can happily move from there. I'm going to go through to using this top navigation, go through to our settings, over to our experiences tab, and then underneath here you'll see this is normally where we navigate to the different experiences to edit. There is another tab here called theme, and we can change the different colors that are available within the theme. We can also change the fonts, and so what we want to do here is change it to a inter font type for the headings, and we want to set the size for the different heights here because these are the ones that we're using within the design. So this is for a H1 and a H2. I'll hit save on those. And then if I go back and refresh here, because I've used a H1 and a H2 here, we can see that that's instantly applied those different sizes, which is exactly what we're after. So if we go back to our About experience and click through into here, you can see because the display is on a smaller screen, we're seeing that demonstrated there. So the other thing I'm seeing is that this text is quite a lot smaller than our reference image, and so our reference portfolio. And so I'm going to go into our content text type here and modify the typography just to be a little bit larger. So I'm going to set it to a default font size of 24, which is quite large, because that's what our one is there. I'm going to set it to the 400 font weight. We want this to maintain that left text alignment, and we're going to go through and do a similar sizing application for all of these ones down here. Now, we want the typography to apply across the entire subset of the boxes in this one here. So instead of going, instead of applying the typography changes in these lower hierarchy text areas, I'm going to change it in this box here. Okay, so if we hit publish on this one, go over to our sample page, save. We're looking pretty good. There's a couple of spacing changes that we need to make, and so let's go ahead and make them now. In our container box, we want to add quite a large gap here, so I'm going to add 84 gap. That's going to increase our spacing between the two sections. So let's go and see very quickly, just with that small change, what that's added. It's given us that white space feel by increasing this gap between the profile section and the about section. The other major gap is between the multiple sections in the about section there. So let's go through and add some gaps in there as well. Again, we could individually apply spaces through padding, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the about section, go into our spacing, and add a gap for between each of the elements in there. And I can very quickly see that that's added way too much spacing between these awards. And I can fix that by going to our block selector and bringing a new box in here, going to our tree navigator, making sure that it drops into our awards and pulling each of those awards into a containing box. So what that does, I'll bring this text in here as well, that makes sure that for the about section here, it's got two elements. If I close this one up, it's got two elements, and that gap is applied between those two elements rather than between all of the children elements within there. So in doing that, you probably want to have a smaller gap between this awards container and there. We also need to update some of this font. So in the sample one, it's a slightly larger font weight. I'm going to apply a font weight to each of these awards. So going to update that copy. It's very important when you're creating your portfolio, it needs to say the right awards. All right, so let's hit publish and see those final changes made in there. Well, I can see that that font weight is still not being applied to that. So let's go and see what's going on there. It might need to be just that little bit bigger. So we'll make it 600 across the board for those awards and hit publish. This is looking exactly like we'd like it. So when we take this to the smaller screen, you can see that it's quite adaptive. The text is still very easy to read, and it looks very clean with all the white space there. Now, if we wanted the profile section of this to be centered when we're in a smaller screen, we can go back and do that by going back to the About experience and selecting this container. Now, currently it's justified to the left. We want to just move that to a center justification. Hit publish and then a refresh over here. You can scroll and see now that that's nicely centered whilst the text remains left aligned. So you've been able to successfully create the About page. Congratulations. Let's go through and double check what we've learned off from this one. So in the About page, we've really focused on the structure of the content. We've seen how you can copy blocks, both when we copied the nav bar, but also copying blocks from within the same experience. You've been able to structure the layout of the content, as well as the different size of the content based on the different screens. So you've been able to build quite a responsive experience from this one. Let's jump into the final page on the portfolio, which is the contact page. In this section of the tutorial, we're going to focus on creating a contact form, creating a contact form schema, styling that contact form in a way that matches the aesthetic of the portfolio that we've got, and creating a submit contact form flow so we can save all of those wonderful contact forms that we're going to be submitted. So let's have a look on our reference portfolio, what this looks like. So we've got our contact page selected, got a nice heading here, a nice contact email that we can follow through with, those same social media links. We've got a contact form that takes we've got a contact form that takes a name, an email, and a nice message, and then when we hit submit, it gets a confirmation that's been submitted and clears out that contact form. Let's get to work on creating it. All right. So before we go in and start creating a brand new experience, we're actually going to go back to the home section of the space and create a brand new schema to hold all of these contact forms. So we're going to call this schema a contact form. We're going to add the properties that we saw. We're going to see name, we're going to see email, we're going to say message. Now the difference here is that these are all going to be just plain text type fields. For name and email, we're happy with those to be short text fields, but we want the display of the message to be that slightly larger. So Got these two smaller ones here and a slightly larger message field for this one. So instead of the display being text, we're going to choose the display to be text area. And we're going to create the schema. The final thing that we're going to do is we're going to change this display template. Instead of it showing the automatically generated ID, we actually want that to show the contact form submitted name. So let's replace ID with name, making sure that we get that capital in there, and hit save. So we can go over here and see that this contact form schema has been created. We've got no contact forms submitted yet, and to be expected. All right, so that sets up. Now we can go back to the home screen here and create a brand new experience. Let's call this one contact. Again, we can give it a custom title there, and that path name is going to be what's on the end of the URL. Once again, we're going to want to copy over a box and copy over some of the content from the other experiences that we've created. I'm going to open this into a new tab so I can go to our About page that we just worked on and copy the body. I'm going to go into our tree navigator and paste that in. You can see how you're getting, a lot of things that you start to repeat. Finally, we're going to go through and modify the typography text here to remove that color. I'll go back to the About and add this color here. We have the links in there. We'll make sure that we'll add this link experience because we already have the link for the About going to the About and the link for the Home going to the Home. This is looking quite good. So if we go back to our contact form here, we need to start structuring this out. Again, it's going to be a 2-column display. So we'll be able to leverage some of the work that we've already done for this 2-column display here. We'll get everything from the container. So we've got the nav bar in, we've got our main section, then we've got our container. Remembering our container has the layout of the row already for those columns and the justification and wrapping behavior. It's also got a maximum width set here, but it's going to take up 100% of the available width, but it's going to contain all of the content into that single section there. So we're going to want to bring in 2 boxes in here. The first is going to be the contact form, and the second is going to be that image section. All right, so in our contact form section, what we're going to do is we're going to add in some of the heading text. We're going to be adding in a box to contain those social media links. And we're going to be adding in a box to contain the contact form. So let's structure those out. The header, the social links, and the contact form. So let's bring that text in. And we need to, again, style this. Instead of it just being a straight paragraph, we're going to set this top one to a heading 1. So you can see that's been popped up there. We're going to keep this second bit of text here as the text, but we're going to modify the typography to be a slightly bigger default size. And that should be all that we need to modify for that. Let's go and have a look and see what that's looking like. Perfect. So that's that slightly bigger heading, ready to go. And again, we already have these social links in another experience that we want to pull in. So let's go back in, grab these social links from here, copy them over. Once you start creating these, it can really become a lot quicker. Because in our reference they are left aligned, we'll need to go through here, layout, instead of justifying them to the center, we want to justify them to the start. And that is looking quite good. And now we get to start building out our contact form, which can be a really exciting bit here. Again, this is a dynamic bit of content. And so we get to introduce in our contact form section here, we want to set the context of this to be a contact form schema. What that does is it just gives this experience insights into the shape of that contact form schema that we designed so it can reference it. So if we go into this box, we're going to use a brand new block here called an input block. If I drag that in, we can choose and configure the input over here to select from a contact form datum, which is the reference that we've got up here. So what we can do is we can leave it just like this. It would work as we would want it to work, but it doesn't quite match our aesthetic. But let's make sure we go through and get it functional first. So we've got our name, our email, and our message coming through. The one thing that we're missing is a submit button. So let's build that now. We'll pull the button and pull it under there. And in our button, we've got a flow trigger. And so this will be triggering off a flow to take this content from the contact form and save it into our contact schema over here. So I'll show you how we can hook that up. If we click into the button, you can see we don't have any flows in this current space, but we can quickly make one by hitting this plus. What we're going to do is we're going to call this the submit contact form flow. In our flow designer, you've got, I'm going to create that here. In our flow designer, you've got the ability to see previous versions of what you've created, view the execution, so every time this flow has been called in the past, see whether it's in a draft, published, or superseded state, as well as clone or remove it from these two drop-downs, and publish for when it's ready to go. On this drop-down from the new nodes over here, this is where you can add nodes or capabilities into your flow. We're going to add a couple of these shortly. But what we're going to focus on is the default node that's already on the canvas here, which is our flow trigger. This is the start of our flow. So let's drag that up to the top, open up the incoming data, and add some incoming data into it. So I'm just going to zoom out. I can do that with my keyboard and mouse, or I can use these controls over here. What we're going to select is a type of entity and a contact form. So what this is telling us is that we want to start this flow with a contact form that's being submitted or sent to it. From there, we want to create a brand new object in the contact form schema over here. And we want to set the name, email, and message that come from this form, that come from this contact form that's been started at the flow. I'm going to pull this trigger down here. That's our trigger, or our control flow is controlled by the gold lines. When this means that when this flow is triggered, the next step that's going to be taken is this object create over here. Now, before we can create the object, we need to map in some name, email, and message properties. So I'm going to use the object pick, and we're going to connect the contact form that was submitted with the contact form pick here. We're going to choose the name, email, and message fields. So you see these are going to match up quite nicely. But we want to link the name that's submitted on that object, the email that's submitted on that object, and the message that's submitted on that object into this creation node. Now that's all we would need to do. So let's hit publish there. I'll go back to our contact experience and we'll select that submit contact form flow and that first trigger node that we see. And we want to make sure that we're passing in that contact form here. Brilliant. Let's hit publish. And the only thing that we want to change is the text in our button. I want to make that say submit and hit publish. Now let's go to our cloud. We can see we've got our contact form. If I see Steph at ligantic.com. Hi there. When I hit submit, that's gone through. And if I go to our contact forms over here, we've got a brand new contact form that's landed all the way from our experience into our contact form schema. So we could stop right there and we have a working contact form, but let's go through and make sure it's going to meet how we want the design to look. So I'm just going to move me up a little bit so we can get into our space settings. Go to our experiences and go back to that contact experience, and we'll do a little bit of final finessing in here. So if we go back to the demonstration contact form, it doesn't look like just the default form here. We want to add some styling to it. So the way that we do that is we actually build it field by field. And we want the name and the email to be side by side and the message to fill up underneath it. So let's go through and structure that out. We're of course going to start with our box blocks to do that, and we'll bring in those within the contact form. We're going to go into the input. Instead of the contact form and no path, I'm going to choose name. Now we can see that's changed from being an entire contact form now to instead just being, it means that we need to start adding the rest of the design around it. So we need to add a text box in here. I mean, a text block in here. And write name. So you can see this now, this box now contains the label and the input itself. But in our demonstration one, we also have some placeholders and some styling around the input. So let's do that now. If we select this input here, open up the configuration, we can see that we want a placeholder and we want a border. With a color, and we want this to have rounded edges here. So want the radius to be set like that. We also want to have a background. And instead of it being the default display component, we need to select the text field. We can also choose text area if we want it to be larger, but we want text field, and then it'll showcase that placeholder there for us. The only other thing that we've got to make a change on is putting a little bit more spacing in there, just like in that reference one. That's starting to look very similar. Oh, I can see that our typography should have a very thin font weight added to it. And doing so, that's starting to look quite nice in comparison. So now we're going to go and copy that for the other two fields in this contact form. So rather than going through that entire configuration process, I'm going to just take the spacing or the padding, default padding out of this box. And I'm going to pull in two other boxes and copy the content over before I configure it. Currently, they're all referencing name, but let's change this one to name, this one to email, and this one to message. And we'll go through and make those changes. So for the email, I'll change that label to email. We want to change this input instead of it referencing the name. We want it to reference the email. We want the placeholder to change from first name to email. We've got the name, got the email. I'm going to go through and change. I'll close this nav bar up so we can see a little bit better. I'm going to go through and change the message. So changing the label to message and going into this input and changing it from name to message. Let's give it a little moment to catch up there. We want to change this from a text field to a text area, so it's that little bit larger. We want to change the placeholder from first name to enter message here. Now this one's been saved. I'm going to hit refresh on it so we can see everything as we need it to be. That's looking really quite good compared to what we had as default. Let's make sure it's still working. That one's gone through and submitted. We'll open up these contact forms in a new thing here, and we've got that second test message coming through, which is perfect. The only other thing we want to do is have these name and email side by side. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag another containing box in, and we're going to bring that to the top level of the contact form and just bring our name and our email to sit within it. What we want to do here is remove the default padding and go to our layout and make those justify against a row. We do want to have some spacing in there. Let's put a gap of 12. All right, this is starting to look just like what we wanted in our reference here. Again, we probably want to make sure that these are all nicely aligned on our left. And to do that, we want to remove this default padding because we're capturing the spacing out in our gap there. So by removing that padding, you're seeing everything's nicely lining up on the left. But we will need to make sure that we're putting in that nice padding gap, that nice gap that we want to see, so that we still get that nice white space that we want to have. All right, just looking at this contact form, we also want to have some gap in here. All right, that's starting to map across nicely. The final thing that I'm looking at in our reference here is our button itself has a slightly different styling. So let's go into our button, into our background. It's got the default gray there. We can just remove that. And instead of our button being all the way across the center there, we want to go into our contact form and make sure our layout is aligning to the left. We want our message to be to full width size, 100 pixels, sorry, 100%. And that is looking like a mighty fine contact form just there. The only other section we've got here beyond our contact form section is our image. I'm going to grab a brand new image in, drag it into the column, make sure it goes into the right column area. We want to go into the image, choose an entity from our images, and we want this one to be a little bit bigger. Because we want it to cover the entire image here every time. We want this fit to be a cover style, so it takes up the entire space of the image there. We'll select that. Let's hit publish and see what we've got. Perfect. We've got our contact form that's working. So All right. Just in doing this final test, I've found two things that are missing. First, our contact form should clear itself here. We want to get a success message that comes up, and we want our submitting to say submitting instead of loading. So let's make those quick 3 final changes that we need to make on our contact page. I'm going to click the button here and want to show loading state. And so then instead of loading, I want to say submitting, just to keep it consistent with the text. And the other 2 changes are going to be changes that we make in the flow. So let's hit publish here. Go back to our button. We can navigate to the flow that this links to directly from here. So there are 2 more nodes that we want to add on successfully creating a contact form entity here. I'm going to scroll all the way down to past all of these other capabilities to our UX action. And with our UX action, we want this to trigger when we successfully create the contact form. And what we want to do is we want to set the data on our contact experience. We want to set that contact form, and we want it to set to null. So I'm going to leave that select path empty. There's another thing that we want to do here is we want to do a UX message. So I'll drag that one in. Again, when we successfully create that contact form, we want to see that little green success message come up. And we want that to be a success type. We want it to be a toast, which is that little pop-up there. And we want to say contact form submitted. Now we also want to send a message to our users if for some reason there was an error when creating the contact form. So let's drag one more message on here and let them know with a warning there was an issue saving your message. Please try again. And here we want this to trigger when there's an error creating that contact form. We'll save that, make sure we publish it. And then when we go back to our contact page and refresh, we hit submit, we get a success message, we get our contact form being cleared, and you would have seen just for a split second there, it said submitting on that contact form button. All right, we are nearly ready to hit publish on our portfolio, which is a great spot for us to be in. There are a few things I always love to check just before we go through the final stage. First is our nav bar. Now I know we want to make sure these links are all going to the appropriate experiences, which they are, but I know that they're not on all of our experiences. So our homepage, which we created first, we didn't have all of the experiences to link to. So I'm just going to go through and quickly make sure that this nav bar is going to work on all of the experiences that we've created. We want to hit publish on here. And again, back to the experiences, making sure the about page has everything that we want. Perfect. Now that that cleanup of all of the experiences is done well, what we can do is we can go back to the space settings, either through this top navigation or down the bottom, and we can give this a name. We can randomly generate a name, and what that does is give us encouraging brown bird, or we can go Steph's demo for portfolio. Either way, this needs to be a unique name across the Ligantic platform. And what that does is gives an experience where we can go and have a public link. Oh, we can't quite have a public link yet because we don't have a public authentication strategy. One of the things with the Ligantic platform is that we're really, really stringent on making sure that you've got the appropriate security practices in place. And so what we need to do is go through and create an authentication strategy for public users or people who are guest users on visiting your website. So we want to make sure we're only opening up what they can view. So we can do that now by going to our auth section of our space settings and creating a strategy or auth section here. Rather than creating a strategy, we're going to create a role, and this role is going to be called public. Now for the public role, what we're going to want is for them to be able to read the images, the website images. We want them to be able to read the portfolio images. We also want them to be able to read the contact form, but we only want them to be able to read the shape of the contact form, not anyone else, not any submitted ones there. So we only want them to be able to see when a property is null. So that looks like they can only see empty contact forms. We want them to be able to execute or submit the submit contact form flow. And we want them to be able to view the about, the contact, and the home page. So let's create that role now. So that looks like that there. What we've been able to just do then is create a custom role. And now we can go through and create an authentication strategy. So we want to do a guest strategy. So this is for everyone who's coming on and viewing this as a guest. And let's go ahead and create that strategy. All right, perfect. So now let's go back to those experiences and look at that public link. Brilliant. We've got a public link, a publicly facing URL that you can go through and have a look at this portfolio that we've created. Well done. It's been a really great way for us to demonstrate so many of the different functionality and elements for you to create custom experiences using the Ligantic platform. You can also explore creating custom domains if your user level allows for that. I've really enjoyed being able to show you all of the things that you can create on the Ligantic platform. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or would like to see something else in our tutorials come to life. Or if you'd like to create this portfolio yourself, I look forward to seeing what it looks like. Thanks so much. Talk soon.